My name is Claire Bennett. 11 years ago, my mother called me a disgrace and threw me out into the cold night with nothing but a backpack. Today, I returned to this town on my own private jet. My 5-year-old daughter Lily held my hand as we stepped out of the car in front of the house I once called home. The look on my parents' faces was worth every sleepless night I spent building a life they said I was too weak to create. Their eyes widened as if they were seeing a ghost, one they had buried and never expected to rise again. Before I tell you how I turned rejection into freedom, take a moment. Leave a comment sharing where you're watching from. If you believe no one should decide your worth, but you subscribe. This is the story of how I learned to belong only to myself. Growing up in the Bennett household looked perfect from the outside. A white fence, rose bushes trimmed to the inch, windows always spotless. Inside, it felt like walking on glass. My mother Evelyn ruled with a soft voice and a hard heart. She believed control was love. If I disagreed, she called it rebellion. My father Thomas was gentle but absent. He worked long hours at the accounting firm. When he was home, he stayed silent. His eyes followed the floor whenever my mother's words cut too deep. Evelyn measured my worth in obedience and appearances. A proper young lady, she'd whisper, never questions her mother's wisdom. By 15, I knew she'd never see me for who I was, only who she needed me to be. A polished daughter to complete her perfect picture. At night, I lay awake wishing for a different life. A life I chose. My room was the only place I could breathe, faded posters hidden behind the closet door, a small stack of business school brochures under my mattress. They were my secret rebellion. Evelyn had plans I could never accept. She dreamed of me marrying Victor Hale, the son of her wealthy friends. Victor was 15 years older. He watched me with a smile that never reached his eyes. Whenever he came to dinner, I felt my skin tighten. His hand would rest on my shoulder too long. His gaze moved over me like I was already his. At the table, my father stared at his plate. My mother beamed with pride. Victor is the perfect match, she'd say. You'll thank me one day. I never believed her. Deep inside, I knew I would never belong to anyone who saw me as a prize to win. When I turned 17, the pressure grew louder. Every meal became a negotiation I never agreed to join. Evelyn laid out floral dresses for me, always too delicate, too soft. I preferred jeans and the feeling of being real, not dressed up for someone else's approval. One evening, she announced Victor would visit again, this time with his parents. "We have something special planned," she said, her voice sugary and sharp. I felt the walls close in. My acceptance letter to Stanford was hidden in my desk drawer. She didn't know yet. Or maybe she did and chose to pretend it didn't exist. That night, I sat on my bed tracing the college crest on the envelope. My hand shook. Freedom was so close, but I feared how far she would go to keep me under her control. I promised myself I wouldn't surrender. The night Victor's family came for dinner, the air felt heavy, like it knew what was coming. The table gleamed with polished silver and crystal glasses. My mother moved between the kitchen and dining room, her smile tight, her eyes watchful. Victor sat across from me, his expression calm, certain. He tapped a small velvet box with one finger, as if reminding me this was already decided. I tasted nothing of the food. Every bite turned to ash in my mouth. My father kept clearing his throat, unable to meet my gaze. After dessert, Victor stood. The scrape of his chair sounded like a warning. He walked to my side and bent down on one knee. "Claire Bennett," he began, opening the box to reveal a diamond ring. "Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" The room fell silent. My heart pounded. I couldn't speak. My chest felt too tight to hold words. Evelyn's eyes glittered with triumph. My father looked away ashamed. Victor weighted his hand steady like he already owned me. I need some air," I whispered. My voice cracked too small in that grand dining room. Without waiting for permission, I stood and walked toward the back porch. My pulse thudded in my ears, drowning out their shocked whispers. The night air was sharp against my face. I gripped the railing, trying to steady the quake inside me. A moment later, footsteps followed. Victor's shadow fell across the porch. "That wasn't the answer I expected," he said, his tone flat. I turned to face him. "We barely know each other," I managed. He laughed once, no humor in it. "Don't be naive, Claire. This isn't about knowing, it's about what's best for everyone." "What's best for everyone?" I repeated the words, tasting bitter. Victor stepped closer. "Your mother promised you understood. This arrangement has been planned for months." "Arrangement," I said, my voice low. like a contract. His eyes didn't waver. Yes. Your father's career, your mother's reputation, my family's investments, everyone benefits. What about me? My hands were shaking now. What do I get? He tilted his head as if puzzled by the question. Security, a comfortable life. You'll never have to struggle. I took a step back. And my future, my dreams, Victor's mouth tightened. My wife won't need a career, a few hobbies perhaps, cooking classes, but ambition only causes problems. For a moment, the porch seemed to tilt under my feet. No, I said, each letter firm. I won't marry you. His face darkened. You'll regret this, he hissed before turning away. I stayed outside, breathing in the cold night until my heart slowed. Inside, their voices rose, then fell to angry murmurs. I knew I couldn't hide forever. When I stepped back into the dining room, the mood had curdled. The Wilsons were gathering their coats, their faces tight with offense. My mother stood rigid, her hands clenched. My father hovered near the door, pale and silent. As the front door closed behind our guests, Evelyn turned to me. Her composure cracked like thin ice. What have you done? She demanded, her voice shaking. I've saved myself, I said, feeling something hard and calm settle inside me. I won't be his possession, her eyes flared. You ungrateful child, do you realize what you've thrown away? You've ruined everything we built. I looked at my father, hoping for help, but he only stared at the carpet. You're a disgrace, my mother whispered, her voice low and sharp. I lifted my chin. I'd rather be a disgrace than live a lie. Her hand moved so fast I didn't see it coming. The slap cracked across my cheek, hot and sudden. Tears burned my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I pressed my palm to my stinging skin. Get out, she said, her words cold as stone. If you think you're too good for us, leave. See how far you get alone. Evelyn, my father murmured, almost pleading. She cut him off with a look. She made her choice. I stood frozen, the room blurring around me. Then I turned and walked up the stairs. In my bedroom, I grabbed my backpack and stuffed in clothes, my toothbrush, the letter from Stanford. My heart thudded with fear and a thin, fierce relief. When I came back down, the house felt too quiet. My mother had disappeared, leaving only her anger behind. My father stood by the front door holding his wallet. He looked older, in that moment, smaller. Dad, I said, my voice breaking, please don't let her do this. He didn't meet my eyes. He pulled out a few folded bills and pressed them into my hand. This is all I can give you. I stared at the money, $300. A lifetime of love measured out in small bills. I'm sorry, Claire, he whispered. I should have... I don't know. He opened the door. Rain was falling in steady sheets. For a second, I thought he might take it all back, that he would say he was coming with me, but he just stood there waiting for me to go, so I stepped into the night alone. Rain soaked through my dress as I walked down the porch steps. Each drop felt like the world washing me away. I didn't look back. I knew if I did, I might lose the last bit of courage holding me up. At the corner, I stopped under a streetlight. My backpack felt too light for this new life. My face still stung where my mother's hand had landed. With shaking fingers, I pulled out my phone. I had only one person to call. When Audrey answered, her voice was warm and worried. Claire, what's wrong? I swallowed the lump in my throat. I need help. Where are you? She asked, already moving. I gave her the address, my voice breaking. Stay there, I'm coming. I hung up and hugged my backpack to my chest. Rain kept falling, but for the first time, I felt free. Audrey's old Honda pulled up 30 minutes later, headlights cutting through the dark. She jumped out and wrapped me in a hug so tight I almost cried. You're freezing, she murmured, guiding me into the car. Heat blasted from the vents, filling the small space with a kindness I hadn't felt in years. As she drove, I stared out the window. My childhood street blurred past, unrecognizable in the rain. At her parents' house, Audrey led me inside. The living room smelled like cinnamon and safety. Her mom took one look at me and said, "Stay as long as you need." That night, I lay on their couch wrapped in a quilt. My backpack sat on the floor like a promise. I didn't know how I'd survive, where I'd go, or who I'd become, but I knew one thing. I was never going back. 2 weeks turned into a month. I found a part-time job at a coffee shop and enrolled in community college. Stanford would have to wait. I didn't have the money, but I still had my acceptance letter. It felt like hope folded in an envelope. I worked morning shifts, pouring lattes, then took evening classes. At night, I studied in Audrey's kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator, my only company. Some nights, exhaustion pressed so heavy on my chest I thought I might break. But I didn't. When I moved into my first apartment, it was smaller than my old bedroom. The walls were cracked, the pipes leaked, but it was mine. I bought a second-hand mattress and a single plate. No curtains, no luxuries. Sitting on the bare floor, I whispered to myself, "This is the beginning." And it was. The months blurred together. Work, study, sleep, repeat. Sometimes I'd see photos online of old classmates graduating, smiling in their perfect caps and gowns. I felt a sharp ache then, but I never let it swallow me. One Tuesday, a thin envelope arrived. A scholarship I'd pinned my hopes on. Rejected. I sat on the floor, the letter in my hand, the walls pressing close. For the first time, I thought about calling home. I pictured my mother's face if I begged to come back, the satisfaction in her eyes, the control. My finger hovered over her number. Then I called Audrey instead. She didn't say much, just listened. When I finished, she said, "You've come too far to turn around." I hung up and took a deep breath. No matter how hard this got, I'd rather struggle on my own than surrender who I was. The next morning, I went to work with swollen eyes. My hands shook as I made coffee orders. Around noon, a woman watched me clean the counter. She looked elegant, confident. Her name tag read, "Elaine Carter. You look tired," she said kindly. "Rough week," I tried to smile. "Rough few months." She nodded, studying me. "You're smart. I can see that." The next day, she returned. The day after, too. On her third visit, she handed me a card. "I'm hiring a junior assistant at my marketing firm. No experience needed, just determination." I stared at the card, heart pounding. "I can't promise it will be easy," she added, "but it will be a start." That night, I held the card under my lamp. The letters blurred from my tears. For the first time in months, I felt something stronger than fear. I felt hope. I started at Elaine's firm the next Monday. The office smelled like fresh paper and ambition. My job was simple. Answer phones, file documents, keep things organized. But to me, it felt like stepping into another world. Every morning I arrived early. I watched how Elaine moved, how she spoke to clients, how she solved problems without blinking. At night, I still took classes. Marketing, business, anything that felt like it could build a bridge to the future I wanted. 6 months in, I offered an idea for a client's social media campaign. Elaine listened, then actually used it. When the results came back positive, she smiled at me. "Good instincts," she said. That small praise carried me for weeks. I began to believe I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was learning to create something of my own, and for the first time, I felt proud. After that first success, I stayed late whenever I could. I wanted to prove I was worth the chance Elaine had given me. When a big project almost collapsed, I volunteered to help. For 7 nights straight, I worked until dawn. We saved the campaign. The client renewed their contract. Elaine pulled me aside, her eyes warm. "You're ready for more," she said. She promoted me to coordinator. The raise meant I could leave my tiny apartment and rent a place without mold on the walls. I bought a small desk and a real bed. When I turned the key in my new door, I stood there a moment just breathing. It wasn't much by anyone else's standards, but to me it was proof I hadn't been wrong to walk away. Step by step, I was building the life no one thought I deserved. Even with the progress, some nights doubt still found me. When a pipe burst and ruined my textbooks, I sat on the kitchen floor, water pooling around me, and wondered if I was fooling myself. But every time I thought about giving up, I remembered that night in the rain, the door closing behind me, my mother's cold voice telling me I was nothing without them. I refused to prove her right, so I kept showing up, kept studying, kept working. One evening, Elaine called me into her office. I thought maybe I'd made a mistake. Instead, she held out an envelope. "I nominated you for a Young Professionals Award," she said. "You won." My hands trembled as I took it. It wasn't about the title. It was the first time someone had seen me not as a burden or a disappointment, but as someone capable. After the award, everything shifted. Clients started asking for me by name. Elaine trusted me with bigger projects. I learned to pitch ideas, negotiate contracts, and lead a small team. On weekends, I still took classes, determined to finish my degree. It felt like piecing together a puzzle no one believed I could complete. One Friday night, I stayed late to prepare a presentation. Alone in the quiet office, I looked around and realized how far I'd come. From a couch in Audrey's living room to this desk piled with work I loved. I thought of my parents sometimes, wondered if they ever asked about me, but mostly I thought about the girl who had walked into the storm with nothing. I owed her everything. Without her courage, none of this would have been possible. I promised I would never forget that. 3 years after I left home, I finally completed my associate's degree. Elaine took me to dinner to celebrate. Over candlelight, she raised her glass. "This is only the beginning," she said. I smiled, but inside, doubt still whispered. How could I ever have enough to start over completely? As if she heard my thoughts, Elaine slid a folded paper across the table. A job offer. More responsibility? Better pay. Take it, she urged. You've earned this. That night, I sat at my kitchen table reading the offer again and again. I thought about my mother telling me I'd never succeed alone. My father's quiet surrender, Victor's cold certainty that I belonged to him. All of them had been wrong. I signed the contract with steady hands. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't known in years. I felt free. I traded my old car for something reliable. I moved into a brighter apartment with real windows and warm water. Every morning, I woke up eager to work, to learn, to prove mostly to myself that I was capable. Some nights were still hard. Bills piled up faster than paychecks. Loneliness came in waves. But when doubt crept in, I'd touch the envelope from Stanford still hidden in my drawer. A reminder that I hadn't given up on the girl who dreamed bigger than her circumstances. When I finally started taking university classes again, transferring credits felt like unlocking a door I'd almost forgotten. Each lecture, each assignment was another small rebellion against the limits others had set for me. I was building a life on my own terms, and it felt right. 2 years later, I walked across a stage in a rented cap and gown to receive my bachelor's degree. In the audience, Elaine clapped the loudest. My parents' seats were empty. I hadn't invited them. As the dean handed me the diploma, I felt a quiet pride settle in my chest. After the ceremony, Elaine hugged me tight. "You did this," she whispered. "No one else." That night, back in my apartment, I set the diploma beside my old acceptance letter. Side by side, they told a story no one else could see. The girl who'd been cast out. The woman who'd built herself up again. I poured a glass of cheap champagne and raised it to the empty room. "To freedom," I said aloud, and for the first time, I truly believed I had earned every part of it. A few weeks later, Elaine called me into her office. Her expression was serious, but her eyes were warm. "You've outgrown this place," she began, her voice steady. Panic fluttered in my chest. "What do you mean?" She smiled. "I mean, it's time you built something of your own." I shook my head. "I don't have the money or the connections." Elaine reached into her drawer and pulled out a check. She slid it across the desk. "Consider this an investment, not a gift," she said. "I want 15% of whatever you build." My hands trembled as I picked up the check. $50,000, enough to start. Tears blurred my vision. "Why are you doing this for me?" Because she said softly, "Someone once took a chance on me. Now it's your turn." In that moment, possibility felt as real as air. I signed the papers to start my own company one rainy morning. Turner Marketing Consultants. My name on the door felt unreal, like I was borrowing someone else's life. The first office was a tiny space above a bakery. The walls smelled like fresh bread and paint. I bought a used desk, a second-hand laptop, and a single potted plant to make it feel less lonely. Clients didn't line up overnight. In the beginning, I took every job, social media posts, brochures, even designing menus. Some nights, I lay awake, afraid it would all collapse. But slowly word spread. A bakery tripled their foot traffic after my first campaign, they told their friends. One client became 3, then 6. I hired my first employee, a young woman named Hannah. Watching her unpack her things at the next desk, I thought, this is real. This is mine. By the end of the second year, my company had a real office and 8 employees. I paid back Elaine's investment in full, though she kept her share. She said she wanted to stay part of the journey. Sometimes late at night, I walked through the empty office touching the backs of the chairs. I thought about the girl who had left home with a backpack and nowhere to sleep. She wouldn't have recognized this place. One afternoon, I was preparing for a pitch when a new client walked in. His name was Michael Reeves. He owned a chain of eco-friendly stores. Unlike others, he didn't just ask about numbers. He wanted to know what I believed in. I remember thinking how rare that felt, someone caring about the story behind the work. I didn't know then that meeting him would change everything, but it did. Michael's questions stayed with me long after the meeting ended. He asked why I started my business, why I cared about small companies no one else noticed. No one had ever asked me that. Not really. When we won the contract, I felt a quiet thrill. His respect felt different from the shallow approval I'd chased before. Over the next months, we worked late side by side. We debated strategies, shared coffee, and traded stories about growing up. I learned he had built everything himself after losing his parents young. He understood what it meant to start from nothing. One night, as we packed up files, he looked at me and said, "You deserve everything you've created." His voice was gentle but sure. Something shifted inside me. In that moment, I realized I'd stopped feeling like an imposter, and for the first time, I let myself believe it. Our work meetings slowly blurred into something more. We started grabbing dinner after long days. Not business dinners, real ones where we talked about music and books and how we both hated small talk. One evening after a quiet meal, Michael walked me to my car. He paused, hands in his pockets. "Can I kiss you?" he asked softly. No one had ever asked before. They just took. Assumed, expected. I nodded, my heart thudding in my chest. The kiss was simple, careful, nothing like the forced touches I'd escaped years ago. Driving home, I felt something new. Not fear, not doubt, a quiet knowing. This was what respect looked like, what choice felt like. I thought about my mother's voice telling me no man would ever value my independence. And in that moment, I knew she had been wrong about everything that mattered. 2 years into our relationship, Michael and I found out I was pregnant. The test sat on my bathroom sink, a small piece of plastic that changed everything. When I told him, my hands were shaking. "I don't know if I can do this," I whispered. He took my face in his hands. "Whatever you decide, I'm here. No demands, no ultimatums, just trust." I thought about the night I left home, how my mother claimed I was throwing my life away. But this didn't feel like losing anything. It felt like building something new. When our daughter Lily was born, she weighed 5 pounds, 6 ounces. Small but fierce. The first time I held her, she opened her eyes and looked straight into mine. In that moment, I promised her she would always know she was loved for exactly who she was. Balancing motherhood and running my company was harder than anything I'd faced. I turned a storage room into a small nursery. Lily napped in a bassinet while I led meetings and answered emails. Some days exhaustion pressed so heavy on my shoulders I thought I might break, but Michael shared every burden. He rearranged his schedule so we could trade off late nights and early mornings. We became partners in the truest sense. When Lily turned 2, Michael proposed on an ordinary Tuesday night. No grand gesture, no ring the size of my fear, just a simple band and the words, "I want us to be a family, all of us." I said yes without hesitation, because this was nothing like the life I'd been forced to run from. This was love built on respect, patience, and choice. The kind of love I had once believed didn't exist. By Lily's 5th birthday, my company had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. We had 3 offices and 70 employees. Business Insider called us one of the fastest growing firms led by a woman. The day we bought a small company plane, I thought about that rainy night when I'd walked away with nothing. I never planned to see my parents again. Their absence became a quiet ache I learned to live with. Then one evening, Lily asked Mommy, "Why don't I have grandparents like Zoe?" Her question pierced a place I'd kept locked away. I looked at her curious face, so full of trust. How could I explain that some families hurt you so deeply you couldn't go back? That night, I sat awake long after the house was quiet, and for the first time in years, I wondered if the story with my parents was really over. A week later, an email arrived from a cousin I barely knew. She wrote simply, "Your father had emergency heart surgery. He's recovering, but it was serious. I thought you should know." I read it 3 times, my chest tight. For years, I told myself I didn't care, that their silence proved we were strangers now. But holding that message, I felt something I couldn't name. Loss, maybe, or the ghost of old love that never fully died. That evening, Michael found me on the patio staring at nothing. "Does it hurt?" he asked gently. "Yes," I whispered. Even after everything, he sat beside me, his hand warm on my back. "You don't have to decide anything tonight," he said. But I knew a choice was coming, one I couldn't avoid forever, because part of me still needed to face the people who'd broken me and survived. The next month, I planned a business trip to Pennsylvania. We were opening a new branch office. The numbers made sense. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just about work. Michael watched me pack Lily's suitcase. "You're sure you want to do this?" he asked. "No," I admitted. "But maybe it's time." When our plane landed, the landscape felt both familiar and foreign. The same streets, the same river, but I wasn't the girl who left. At the hotel, I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing my blazer. My reflection looked calm, but my heart raced. Lily tugged my hand. "Will they be nice?" she asked softly. I knelt so we were eye to eye. "I don't know, sweetheart, but whatever happens, we'll be okay." She nodded, trusting me completely. In that moment, I knew I had already built the family I once dreamed of. The next morning, I drove past my childhood home. The white fence was chipped, the garden overgrown. Time had stripped away the perfection my mother once prized. I parked by the curb and took a slow breath. Lily reached for my hand, her small fingers warm against my palm. When I rang the bell, the old chime played its familiar tune. My father opened the door. He looked thinner, older, his eyes widened in shock. "Claire," he whispered, like he'd seen a ghost. Behind him, my mother appeared. She pressed a hand to her chest, unable to speak. "I thought it was time you met your granddaughter," I said quietly. Lily peeked out from behind me and gave a shy wave. For a moment, no one moved. Then my father stepped aside. "Please," he said, voice unsteady. "Come in." Crossing the threshold felt like stepping back in time. The furniture hadn't changed. Same polished table, same framed photos, except none of me after 18. Lily clung to my leg, wide-eyed. My mother hovered near the kitchen doorway, her face pale. "Would you like something to drink?" she asked, her voice brittle. "Water is fine," I said. While she disappeared into the kitchen, my father motioned to the couch. Lily spotted a crystal figurine on the coffee table. She reached toward it, then stopped, glancing at me for permission. "It's okay," my father said gently. "Your mother loved that one when she was little." I sat down, feeling the past pressing in from every corner. When my mother returned, she carried a tray with shaking hands. No one knew what to say. 11 years of silence crowded the space between us, heavier than any words. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "We've followed your career," he said. "All those articles, the awards, we're proud." My mother's eyes flickered as if she wanted to deny it, but she stayed quiet. "I didn't come for approval," I replied, my voice calm. "I came because Lily deserves to know where she comes from." My mother stared at her hands. "I thought you'd never come back." "I almost didn't." She looked up, her expression raw. "We thought we were protecting you. You were protecting yourselves," I said. Silence again. Then Lily climbed onto my lap, her small hand resting over my heart. My father's eyes filled. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "She is," I said softly. "And she's loved." The old wounds still ached. Maybe they always would. But sitting there, I felt something unexpected. I felt ready to keep talking. That evening, we didn't resolve everything. We shared a meal that felt careful, each word measured. But it was a start. Before we left, my mother asked if we could meet again. Her voice trembled. "I don't know," I admitted honestly. "I need time." In the car, Lily held her stuffed rabbit tight. "Will we see them again?" "Maybe," I said, "when it feels right." Back at the hotel, Michael was waiting. He kissed my forehead and didn't ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. Later, after Lily fell asleep, I sat alone by the window looking out at the town I had fled. I thought about everything I'd lost and everything I'd built. Forgiveness wasn't simple. It wasn't quick. But maybe it didn't have to be final either. Maybe it was just another choice, one I could make in my own time. The next morning, I walked Lily along the river where I used to dream about leaving. She skipped ahead, her laughter rising over the water. Watching her, I felt a quiet strength, the kind that grows when you survive what was meant to break you. When we returned to the hotel, I found a message from my father. "Thank you for coming, it read. We hope to see you again. No expectations, just hope." I read it twice, my throat tight. For so long, I'd believed my story with them had ended the night they turned me away. But maybe stories didn't have to end cleanly. Maybe they could be rewritten line by line. That evening, Michael took my hand. "Whatever you choose," he said, "you won't be alone." I believed him, and for the first time, the past didn't feel like a prison anymore. Before we flew home, I drove by the old house one last time. The windows glowed softly. For the first time, it didn't look like a place I had to escape. It just looked like a house. Lily was asleep in the back seat, her small face peaceful. I thought of everything I wanted for her freedom, respect, the right to choose her own life. I whispered a promise to the quiet street. She will never feel what I felt here. When I pulled away, I didn't look back. At the airport, Michael squeezed my hand. "How do you feel?" he asked. I searched for the word. "Lighter," I said finally. As the plane lifted off, I watched the town shrink beneath us. I realized the girl who once walked into the rain had found her way home on her own terms. Back in my office, I hung a new photo on the wall. Lily, Michael, and me all laughing in the park. No forced smiles, no perfect poses, just us. Clients came and went, deadlines loomed, life moved forward, but something inside me had shifted. I no longer felt like I had to prove my worth to ghosts. When my mother called a week later, her voice was quiet. "I'm sorry," she said, "for everything. It wasn't complete, it wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning." I listened, my heart steady. "Thank you," I whispered. After I hung up, I stood by the window, sunlight warming my shoulders. I thought about the girl with a backpack, the woman with a business, the mother with a daughter. All the versions of me had finally met in one place, and together they had found peace. That night, I tucked Lily into bed. She looked up at me, her eyes so full of trust. "Are you happy now, Mommy?" she asked. I smiled, feeling tears rise. "Yes, sweetheart, I really am." In the quiet, I thought of every moment that brought me here, the heartbreak, the fear, the small victories no one saw. I had learned freedom isn't given. It's claimed piece by piece, choice by choice. If you've ever felt alone, if you've ever been told you weren't enough, know this. You can build a life that belongs only to you. It won't be easy. It won't be fast, but it will be yours. If this story speaks to something in you, leave a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from, and if you're ready to reclaim your voice, subscribe, because your story isn't over yet.